Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bop Stop's album swap. This week for album swap, I recommended Joe Through the Chaos by Hypernova. I predict that Joe will give this album a 6.5.
Ooh, a bit low, I must say. So, Through the Chaos by Hypernova is their debut, and it's also their only album, I believe. They disbanded in 2011 or 2012 or something. There isn't much information on them. And I guess this album is, I'd say, mainly just a post-punk album. There's like a bit of post-rock occasionally, some indie, and Wikipedia says it's new wave, but I really disagree with that. I guess his vocals sound kind of new wavy, but I really think this is mostly just a post-punk album. Pretty standard one. That being said, I found myself really enjoying it. The biggest problem with this album is it doesn't really do much new. It never goes above and beyond what I'd expect of a post-punk album. But for what it is, I think it's really good. I love Viva la Resistance. It has these great lyrics on it. Your theocratic neo-fascist ideology is only getting in the way of my biology, which is, I'd love that line. I really like a lot of the energy on a lot of the album too. I think it has, for the most part, a very enjoyable sound and feel to it. It's very danceable post-punk, I guess, if you want to comment.
Yeah, I definitely agree that I do generally enjoy this album, but it does fall short in the fact that it sticks to its roots. I find it very Joy Division-esque, and there's nothing wrong with that. And they do that sound well. I also wish they did more, though.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely feels very Joy Division, although I'd say it's more punky than a lot of Joy Division. And I think there's occasionally times where it really stands out. I think the last song, See the Future, has this like amazing riff with like the delay pedal added on it, which I just think sounds incredible. There's like occasionally some guitar riffs I think are really good, and I really enjoy a lot of the lyrical content on the album. Again, Viva la Resistance, or on the song Fairy Tales, I really like lyrically. I think it's a really creative track about situations that are out of a fairy tale, but they're not ones that end well. I'd say some of my lesser favorite tracks are when they get slower. A song like Empty Times I'm not really big on. It kind of has like a melancholic feel. It's probably the most indie sounding track on the album, and I think it's just way too slow for their style. It's not nearly as fun and danceable as a lot of the other songs on the record. The same with Here and Now, which I also think is pretty just slow and not very catchy, although I do think the kind of like post-rock outro on the track is really cool.
Yeah, I think generally what you're saying is correct. There are a couple tracks here I'm a big fan of. Viva la Resistance it's a very danceable, fun track that I do like, and it's easily the most popular track off this album. My favorite is Lost in Space, personally. I just really love all the lyrics, the verses and the choruses, and the instrumentals on that track. For some reason, it all just works, I think, and I really like it. But in my opinion, for pretty much every really good song here, there's also one that's more okay-ish, and it leads to this album being a bit of a mixed bag in the end, in my opinion.
And this week I recommended Brendan Stage Four by Touché Amoré. So before we started talking, I was going to go with an 8, but you said you like one of the albums here a lot more than the other. So that means you either like it a lot or you don't like it. So I'm going to go higher. I'm going to go for kind of a safe spot at an 8.5 out of 10. That's my prediction.
Today, I'll be reviewing Stage 4 by Touché Amoré. This is the band's 4th studio album, which came out in 2016. The genres of this album, it's post-hardcore and Screamo. So you can't really talk about this album without talking about its subject matter, which would be Touché Amoré's lead singer, vocalist, frontman, Jeremy Bolm. His mother died of cancer, and then he wrote this album. Stage 4, the title being a reference to this being the band's 4th album and also Stage 4 cancer. And I think because of the situation that this album was birthed from. It has a lot of great emotion in it. There have been other albums in the past. I'm going to say specifically A Crow Looked at Me, which was birthed from a similar situation. And these albums tend to carry some very, very potent emotional weight with them. For me personally, the vocals and the lyricism generally is probably the strongest part of this album. Jeremy Bolm's vocal performance throughout the album, I think, is generally very good, and he is obviously feeling the words that he is saying, which I appreciate a lot, definitely. Also, the lyricism here, this album, it's a bit short, it's just 33 minutes. He's not telling you his entire life story by any means, but there is certainly some very potently emotional points. For example, a track like Water Damage, I think, is the best written song off this album. He's just telling you stories about moments before his mother's death and after his mother's death, and really just how these have impacted him and what he remembers. And there are other times where this album is just very beautiful, very poetic. That being said, with albums that are like this, I feel like you need the correct instrumental backing to really bring the point across. A Crow Looked at Me, for example, I think does that beautifully, and that's what makes it such a powerful album. My biggest problem with Stage 4 is that I feel that the instrumentals really take away from the emotional power that this album has. At times, I find them to be generic and bland. At other times, I find them to be dipping into genres like pop punk or power pop that really just are at odds with the tone of Jeremy's vocals. And there's just this disconnect there that makes a lot of these songs not come across the way they were intended, I think. And I think that is something that is most likely unique to me. I know there are likely a lot of people who will not feel that way. Well, listening to it, I find it hard to ignore that fact that on top of these very powerful lyrics, there's these sometimes grating instrumentals that are not complementing the lyrics and vocals at all. If you would like to comment on that, I'm sure you disagree. Yeah.
I disagree entirely where you say that you think the instrumentals take away from the message. I think they add a ton. This feels very much like personal preference because I know you're not that big on post-hardcore and like Screamo in general.
I don't find myself having these problems with a band like La Dispute, so I was honestly kind of surprised.
La Dispute is post-hardcore, but I consider them more emo.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas this is more post-hardcore combined with Screamo, not just in vocals. So I guess like this is more firmly rooted in Screamo, and I know like there's that Loma Prieta album, and I know you weren't that big on that. I guess for me, maybe it's because I have been into more this style of music for longer that I guess the emotional aspect of Screamo, I guess, comes full circle for me. Like, to me, Screamo is already a very emotionally potent genre. I think the instrumentation adds immensely to the album, and like I feel like the kind of rough but like rich sounding instrumentals add a lot to kind of Jeremy's like unstable mental state throughout it. I love the instrumentals for pretty much all the songs. So, Hypernova, Through the Chaos, I think it's a very good record, but I think that's all it is. It doesn't really do anything beyond just being an enjoyable post-punk record, but I would still really recommend it. I would give it a 7 out of 10.
All right. So, for me, with Touché Amoré, Stage 4, my opinion is definitely a bit controversial on this album. I would definitely recommend it to people. I think, for me, just the fact that the instrumentation takes away from the album is a very personal gripe with it. I don't think that would apply to most people. I know this album is generally loved, and I can definitely see why. But personally, I have some very big problems with it. Overall, I'm at a 5 on this project.
Please like and subscribe or dislike if you hate Brendan, like I do.